Hello, and welcome to the COVID-19 recovery strategy video. COVID-19 has impacted us in many ways, and whether it's the lack of toilet rolls in the supermarket or the catastrophe is going to turn out to be it has on local businesses with all the shutdown, we've all been impacted and we're going to be affected in different ways as we go forward. But this has created a real burden on the business owner to make rapid decisions to decide what they're going to do. So switching to presentation, we're at the start of this cycle, and the first thing that we really need to do is to establish, firstly, you've got to become the authority, you've got to be the leader in your business. So I'm assuming that you've taken control, you've sat down with your team, you're keeping in regular communications with your team, your suppliers and your customers. Everybody knows what it is you're planning to do. So you've got a clear way forward. And just by doing that, you start to become the authority in what's going on. Now, the underlying thing I'm going to repeat during this webinar is lots of people are going to be sat there unable to make a decision. They're going to get paralyzed by overwhelm as to what's going on. You only have the opportunity of sitting there doing nothing or making a decision and risking getting it wrong. You can always correct a bad decision. You can't recover the time you've lost by sat there thinking about what you're going to do. So now is the time we need to be thinking about that. So we define where we are leadership-wise. We're leading our team and suppliers and customers. You've sorted your financial situation. So what that really means in this context is you've got rid of all the spending that you possibly can. You may have done things like downsized, but you've created a war chest of money. And obviously there's lots of grants and things coming out of governments that you can get involved in as well to help you on the way. Ultimately, what you've done when you combine those is you've created some stability. Now, once you've created some stability, that's the situation I'm assuming you're at now. And that's where we're going to start working from going forward. So taking it from there. So the situation, the history, let's look at actually how we got here. When you started your business in the first place, you used a rule book, in effect, to create your business model. And what that rule book amounted to is you probably looked at people doing things similar to what you plan to do. You researched the market, worked out where the customers might be, maybe identified a few customers. You had an existing parameter that you could follow. You could see other people that were doing businesses, maybe in different sectors, but you had things that worked. The thing is now that rule book has changed. You now need to, not necessarily totally tear it up, but we now need to think about it and say, actually, all these rules that we previously applied to, we worked to, now don't necessarily work. So this is affecting everybody. And let's take extremes. If you're making sanitizer at the moment, you're probably rushed off your feet. If you're in the hospitality business, you're sat there with a closed door thinking, what on earth do I do now? And they're probably the two extremes. But both of them can be detrimental to the business. If you're working so hard trying to get product out the door, then you're probably not working on the business and we're thinking about what the business is doing. If you're sat behind a closed door thinking the world is over, you're probably not working on the business. The one thing you mustn't do at this stage is you mustn't stop thinking. You mustn't switch off, because as soon as you switch off and you just get your head down and do other things you find more pressing at the moment, the risk is that something happens that you're then not in control. And then if it goes wrong, if you're not watching what's going on, it can go catastrophically wrong. So that's the first thing. So when we reach this situation, we need to create a new business plan to suit, as if it was a startup. So if you imagine what you went through when you started up your business, you need to go through that process again, because everything around you has changed and you need to think about what you're actually going to do. So if we take that as a starting point, if I just give you a couple of examples of smaller scale things which have happened in the past. If you were in the music industry back in the 60s, you were undoubtedly, if you were producing music, you were into vinyl. That industry went away and was replaced by CDs. That industry went away and is now replaced by online music and MP3. Those are mini changes which those, if you were in those markets, had an astronomical impact on those markets. We're now going through a similar astronomical impact on a global scale. So it's not just your sector that's being affected, it's every sector that's being affected, good or bad. So there's a complete new rule book that's being written. If we look at other things which have happened, just think about the gradual evolution of things like marketing. You typically used to be working with something like Yellow Pages. Now, hardly anybody uses Yellow Pages. It's all social media and online, digital marketing. That was a transition, but it was more of a gradual transition. This time we need to move fast. So what about a recovery plan? The first thing to really take on board is your competitors are most likely suffering from indecision paralysis. And what this means is they're in complete overload, they don't know what to do, and they're either sitting on their hands or they're burying their head in the sand when we look at it, because they're unclear as to what the way forward is. They're waiting for somebody to set the example. And if you look at this from that point of view, if you act now, you can have the time advantage. So while they're sat there pondering, if you can't make an action as to what you're going to do, you will be ahead of them. So if there is a problem with the choice that you choose going forward and it doesn't work, you have some time to correct that choice and try a different way. But the chances are a lot of your competitors won't make any move until they see somebody being successful, which hopefully is going to be you. The second thing is, when major changes happen, people tend to stick together. They tend to find safety in numbers. More so because they don't want to be the one who actually sets the wrong decision. But actually what happens is they kind of all flock together and nobody's actually moving. They're all just convincing themselves the situation's catastrophic and there's nothing they can do. Whereas in reality, there's very seldom a situation where there's nothing you can do. So the choice is with you as to what your action is from there. If I give you an example, if we go back to the Second World War, just before the Second World War in America, and at that time, fizzy drink is just starting to become popular. And there's a small company, very, very small company, and there's a few major players. So this very small company, these sort of things tend to be developed by chemists who just sort of local store chemists. And this little local store chemist, Pemberton Chemical Company, was playing around with these fizzy drinks. And they come up with a taste that they thought was quite good. And then the war happened, and you had conscription, and pretty much across the board, all their competitors said, oh, look, we've got hardly anybody here because, you know, all the men have been taken away to Europe for the war. We're just going to stop marketing. We'll batten down the hatches. We'll minimize our costs and wait for people to come back. This little company decided it was going to fly in the face of what everybody else was doing. And it continued marketing. And it also started to look at it from a marketing exercise. And it said, well, okay, well, where have all the men gone who've gone off to fight? And of course, a high percentage of those were in Europe. And so they said, well, the thing is, these people who are out there fighting actually liked our product. So let's go and talk to the armed forces and have a chat with them and see if there's anything we can do to get our product to them. And so they sat down with them, had a discussion, and they said, look, this might give them a bit of sort of feel of home and everything else. How could we help you? Is there any way we could get this product, our product, out to them so they could experience it? And they said, well, it's difficult, obviously, because we couldn't give you the transport to ship huge quantities of materials out there. And they said, well, actually, we don't need huge quantity of material. We can do the concentrate, and then all we need is somewhere to actually bottle it locally, and we can make it out there. So the armed forces help provide them with a manufacturing base in Europe, and they also help them facilitate the distribution. So end of the war comes, and what's happened is this company has got a European distribution. It's been supplying to the troops. It's now got its market has come back from Europe, come back into the USA. And of course, what are they going to buy? They're going to buy the product that they're familiar with. That company is Coca-Cola, as it is now. That company, when everybody else was saying, oh no, world's over, can't do anything, just wait for it to come back again, they were the ones who did something different. This is not a dissimilar situation. The choice is yours. So what about the future? The thing is, COVID-19 could rewrite the rule book forever. And it sounds dramatic, but there's a lot of things in the background that it could tip over the edge. Artificial intelligence being one. It's been talked about quite seriously for a few years. And if any of you have played with an Amazon Alexa, which I'm sure most of you have done, it's very impressive what it can do. Now you take that into a business environment and you start saying, all these admin jobs, all this directing of paperwork, could that paperwork become soft copy? Could inquiries be handled by artificial intelligence? Because if you couple it with the fact that as COVID-19 has this big effect, it's going to squeeze everybody financially. So they're going to want to minimize costs. It could actually, one of the big ways of minimizing costs, it could push people to go to a virtual operation. Because think about it this way. At the moment, we're all shut in, can't go out. We've got to minimize our exposure to the outer world. So we want to buy something. Where do we buy it? We buy it online. We haven't got a choice. So you imagine that if this lasts a few months and if somebody's reserved about buying things online, they're not sure how it works, they're going to have a few months experience of buying online. Now, when you get used to buying online, it's a different parameter. You don't spend 2 hours driving down to the town, parking the car, paying a fortune, going to the shop, driving back. You have to think 2 days in advance. You just click on a button and it comes through your front door. And actually, most people, when they're used to it, it's a far easier way to work. So those sort of things could have a huge impact. We could actually be entering a new business paradigm, which means everything works in different ways. The similar analogy could be back in the 1960s and 70s, or probably more 70s, that's where automation hit production. So you had all these big manufacturing plants suddenly found they could automate. The automation equipment was there to make them run automatically, and they laid off thousands of people. That same thing could be about to happen to the administration and admin management of companies far and wide. So be aware that these changes could be on the cusp of coming about. Sort of things that we could think about. What could it actually mean if you ran in a purely virtual environment? And the list is endless. Some will be appropriate to you, some will run, but sort of things I've written down here. Less headcount, less space, less working hours. If you're running an automated system, you can run 24 hours a day, or it can run 24 hours a day. You can check on it when you like. Less management. If there's less people, there's less management. Less bureaucracy, possibly. All these are question marks which exist. Where it goes, we're not sure. So other areas can be affected as well. So this brings us then to your business plan. The thing is, hopefully you created a business plan at the end of 2019, which was supposed to be your 2020 business plan. You're probably in the position now where completing your quarter one, quarter two's plan is so far out of kilter because the goalposts have moved, you may need to consider scrapping it and starting again. That sounds a perfectly reasonable decision to make. Now, more than ever, you can't rely on what's worked before and follow in other people's footsteps. But what you've really got to do is to make your own active decision, because there's nobody better than you to make the decisions about your business. And what we really need to do more than ever is to be creative, be different, think outside the box. And if we come back to the situation of who do you ask? If we go back to Henry Ford when he was designing the first cars, and the reality is, if he had gone to his market and said, what would you like? The answer he most likely would have got is a faster horse. But of course, he had an insight way beyond that. And he had to design and develop the car to a point where it could become mainstream before the public could actually start to associate with it. Similarly, you look at Steve Jobs with the iPad. He didn't go out and research the market. He came up with a concept and said, right, let's make some of these and see what the public makes of it. So the whole point here is we are at a cusp in time, and you need to go out and most probably reinvent yourself. You need to look at things from a different perspective. You need to go out there with a positive attitude, and you need to show people what you can do. I hope that's useful to you. The real thing here is you need to make decisions and move forward. But I wish you all the best in your business. I'm David Betts, Business Coach, based in Colchester. I hope to catch up with you soon.